My name is Skylar Morgan. When I was 32, my mother pointed straight at my face at the dinner table and shouted, "You're so ungrateful. Get out of my house, and don't you ever come back." What she didn't know was I was the one whose name was on that house. For the past 5 years, I had quietly paid over $112,000 in mortgage payments, just to make sure my parents had a safe place to live. No thank you, no recognition, only control, sarcasm, and eventually, rejection. Have you ever been kicked out of the very place you poured your youth and money into keeping together? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real stories, raw and heart-wrenching, about the family ties we can't cut, but sometimes must change. And this is how it all began. I grew up in a small, gray blue house nestled between tall pine trees in the suburbs of Boulder, Colorado. From the outside, my family seemed ordinary. My dad was quiet, my mom was strict, and I had a younger brother 4 years apart. But there are things people can't see through a window, like how every expectation landed on my shoulders from a very young age. I was the eldest, and that apparently meant I always had to be good, be the example, and sacrifice. My mother, Janice, used to tell neighbors I was the independent one from a young age. But few knew that independence wasn't a gift. It was a defense mechanism of a child who learned early how to stay out of trouble. I learned to cook when I was 8, because mom came home late from work and dad was often exhausted from his post-stroke headaches. I did laundry, cleaned the house, helped mom balance the electric bill. While my friends were taking dance or piano lessons, I stayed home making tea for dad and tutoring my brother in math, even though he never sat still for more than 5 minutes. "You're the older sister, you should understand him better," mom would say, every time Blake acted out. But I was the one getting scolded. Blake was a sweet kid, when he wanted to be. But most of the time he was glued to his gaming console, eating cereal straight from the box, and yelling whenever the Wi-Fi cut out. He dropped out in 12th grade because of mental pressure and stayed home, still gaming. Mom called it resting to find himself. And me? I was never allowed to be tired. I remember once, when I was 16, I had a fever close to 102 degrees, but I still studied because finals were around the corner. When Mom saw me throwing up after dinner, she just said, "You have to try harder. Strong people push through even when they're sick." That sentence stuck with me for years. It became a toxic gospel. If I wasn't exhausted, I hadn't tried hard enough. I dove into school like someone obsessed with proving their worth. I was always top of the class. I tutored 2 neighborhood kids at night, partly for pocket money, but mostly so mom wouldn't say, "You know this family doesn't print money, right?" Those efforts earned me a full-ride scholarship to the University of Colorado Boulder, majoring in finance. I remember the day I got the acceptance letter. My hands shook with emotion as I ran to the kitchen to find Mom. She was washing dishes and didn't turn around. I shouted, "Mom, I got in, full scholarship." She only nodded. "That's a big chunk of money saved. Good job. Dinner's almost ready. Can you set the table?" At the time, I thought maybe she just wasn't good at showing emotions. But the older I got, the clearer it became. She was good at showing them. She saved them for Blake. When Blake had a job interview, Mom bought him a new suit. After a 1-week breakup, she made his favorite soup and stayed by his side all evening. But when I ended my first serious relationship, the only person I ever imagined marrying, I called home in tears, and Mom simply said, "You're a woman. Don't let emotions interfere with your work." And my dad, he stayed quiet, always the silent peacemaker. He loved me, I knew that. But he let everything happen without stepping in, as if speaking up would shatter the illusion. "You know how your mother is. She always gets carried away," he'd say on repeat. I don't blame him. But every time he didn't take my side, I felt more alone. In this family, love came with terms. not as a given. A daughter had to be sensible, successful, self-sacrificing, and silent. I lived that way for over 20 years, believing that if I tried long enough, hard enough, maybe one day my mother would hug me and say, "I'm proud of you." I waited my whole childhood for that sentence. It never came. I still remember that evening clearly. A cold March night, when my phone rang around 8 p.m. The caller ID said, "Mom." I was at the office, scrambling to finish a quarterly report for a major client, but I picked up. Mom never called unless it was urgent. "Skylar, I don't know how to say this." Her voice was trembling, like she'd either been crying or was holding it back. "What's wrong, Mom? We're about to lose the house. The bank sent a final warning. They said if we don't pay in 10 days, they'll begin foreclosure." Her voice cracked. "Your dad doesn't know I'm calling. He'd never allow this. But I don't know what else to do." I leaned back in my chair, swallowing the tightness rising in my throat. "How much do you owe?" "Nearly $17,000 on the overdue balance, not including interest." $17,000. For Minnie, it's an impossible sum. But for me, at that time, while it wasn't small, it was doable. I had been promoted to manager earlier that year and secured a major contract with a law firm. I didn't overthink it. "Send me a copy of the warning letter. Tonight." 3 days later, I showed up at the bank branch on Arapahoe Road, carrying all my parents' legal paperwork and a signed authorization I had Mom complete the night before. I requested a private meeting with their loan officer, a woman named Lisa, platinum hair cut short, eyes sharp with years of credit experience. "You're the daughter of George and Janice Morgan?" she confirmed one last time. "I want the account transferred under my name. Monthly payments should be auto-debited from my personal account." She raised an eyebrow. "You're aware this is a mortgage. It can't be reassigned without a legal title transfer." "I know," I said, pulling out a notarized agreement from my lawyer. "I don't need them to know. I need your system to reflect this. From today, I'm the one paying. I don't want my parents feeling like they're a burden." Lisa went quiet for a second, then whispered, "Not many daughters would do what you're doing." I gave a faint smile. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." From that day on, every third of the month, $1,875 was automatically withdrawn from my account, sent to the bank to cover the mortgage on my parents' old house. Mom called a few weeks later. Her voice sounded light, relieved. "Sweetheart, it's a miracle. The bank said there's a new program for seniors, so they extended the loan and lowered the interest." I was sitting in my kitchen, stirring a cup of tea, not looking at my phone. "Is that so?" I replied, keeping my voice even. "Yeah. I thought we'd have to apply or something, but turns out they gave it automatically. Such good luck." I didn't correct her. Something inside me quietly cracked. Not because Mom didn't know, but because I realized she never asked. She never asked why the good luck happened, never questioned the notice about temporary interest suspension. She accepted it, as if it was something she naturally deserved. From that point on, I quietly became the family's mobile bank. Beyond the mortgage, I paid the electric bills, fixed the leaking roof, and covered my dad's back pain medication. Everything remained under my parents' names, while the payments came from me. "You're such a good daughter," Mom would occasionally say, usually followed by, "The washing machine broke again. Have you checked for any deals?" Not once did she ask, "Are you okay?" Blake, my younger brother, still lived in the basement, unemployed for 3 years. One afternoon when I stopped by, he was playing Call of Duty. In the middle of the day. "Aren't you supposed to have a job interview today?" He didn't take his eyes off the screen. "Mom said there's no rush. You know how those jobs are, all exploitation. And working 10 hours a day like I do, that's not exploitation?" He chuckled. "But you like it." I turned away, afraid that if I stayed one more minute, I'd lose my temper. Kindness slowly turned into obligation. Support became an expectation. Once, when I mentioned I was thinking of buying a house of my own, Mom blurted out, "Why would you buy a house? This one is yours too. No need to waste money living elsewhere. That house, I paid for. It was under my name, but I never truly had a right to belong to it. I hesitated for a long time before deciding to bring Tyler to my parents' house that evening. Tyler was a kind man. He worked night shifts as a surgical nurse, patient, attentive, and most importantly, not intimidated by my job. We met at a corporate wellness seminar my company hosted. He was the first man in years who made me feel I didn't have to become someone else to be worthy of love. Tyler knew I was financially supporting my parents. He didn't agree with it, but never judged. As long as it doesn't hurt you, he once said. But if it ever does, I'll be here the moment you're ready to talk. I thought my mom would like him. At least on the surface, he was well-dressed, polite, didn't drink, didn't brag. But I forgot one thing. To my mother, no one is ever good enough for me. Unless they made me suffer enough for her to feel secure. That dinner featured her usual pot roast, toasted bread, and Caesar salad, her go-to whenever guests were over. My son cooks better than her, Blake chimed in, right after Tyler complimented the salad. He leaned back in his chair, sipping orange juice like he was at his own private party. Really? Tyler smiled politely. If I cooked, you probably wouldn't eat it. I shot Blake a look, but he shrugged. Mom set her fork down and turned to me. Skylar, I hear Tyler's a nurse? Yes. He works night shifts at St. Vincent Medical Center. Mom tilted her head, smirking slightly. Respectable job, but a bit unpredictable with the shifts, right? Tyler still smiled. Yes, the hours are flexible, but I love caring for patients, especially seniors. Mom gave a tight smile, then looked at me. And you, well, you work a desk job. Can't be that exhausting. I was used to these comments, light jabs wrapped in concern, but Tyler wasn't. I felt his hand under the table, gently squeeze mine. I smiled, trying to keep the peace. Every job has its pressures, Mom. She didn't let up. I just think a man being a nurse feels a bit too sensitive. Skylar needs someone stronger, more stable. I saw Tyler flinch slightly, but he stayed calm with admirable grace. Mom, I said, voice steady but soft. I don't think someone's job defines their character or worth. She raised an eyebrow. So you think bringing home a man who lives off insurance claims is some kind of accomplishment? Her words sliced the air. Tyler let go of my hand. I set my fork down and looked her straight in the eye. I won't let you insult the man I love. Mom froze. Her face shifted from disdain to fury. What? Now you're going to teach me how to behave? You don't need anyone to teach you, I said, my voice shaking with restraint. But you also don't have the right to belittle someone just because you don't understand him. Blake slowly pushed back his chair and stood, like he was walking out of a boring movie. I'm heading upstairs. Tyler stayed seated, watching me with concern. I clenched my hands on the table, trying to steady my breath. Mom suddenly stood, rounded the table, and slapped me. The room went dead silent, except for the faint clink of silverware as I jolted back. You're ungrateful, she hissed, face flushed with rage. You dare talk back to me? For some leech of a man? Get out of this house, and don't you ever come back. Tyler shot to his feet. What did you just do? Tyler. I stopped him, my voice hoarse. It's okay, let's go. No, Mom yelled. Let her stay. You get out of my house. I got to my feet, heat still lingering on my cheek, eyes sharp with unshed tears. Tyler grabbed my hand, but I pulled away. Not in anger, but because I didn't want that man to witness another second of the collapse I'd been hiding for years. I turned to look at my mother one last time. You know what? I said quietly. I've spent my whole life trying to make you proud. But it's time I do something that makes me stop feeling ashamed of who I am. And I walked out the door, head held high for the first time. But inside, something cracked. Quietly, irreparably. I don't remember how I drove home that night. My apartment was on the 12th floor, overlooking the Flatirons. At night, the warm lights from faraway houses looked like clumsy stitches on a piece of black velvet. I stayed in the dark, lights off, staring out the window for 10 quiet minutes. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Inside, I touched my left cheek. The sting from her slap still faintly there. I opened my laptop. It took 3 minutes to cancel all automatic transfers from my personal account to the mortgage. 1 minute later, I emailed my attorney, requesting full activation of the ownership clause. The one agreed upon 5 years earlier when I started paying off the loan but wanted legal protection. My lawyer, Laura Mendez, called the next morning. "Skylar, are you sure? Activating the clause means the borrowers, your parents, will be notified." "I'm sure," I said. "I don't want to live as a ghost behind everything anymore." "And the monthly support?" "Put it on hold, completely. Until there's a real conversation." Laura paused for a few seconds, then softened her tone. "I'm so sorry, but I'm also proud of you." 3 days later, I started my first therapy session with a psychologist named Dr. Michelle Harrow, recommended by my best friend, Emily. "What brings you here, Skyla?" she asked, her eyes kind and voice free of judgment. "I think I don't know how to live unless I'm carrying other people." "And what made you want to change that?" I looked out the small window where light filtered through a thin curtain. "Because the one person I trusted most finally walked away. And I don't blame him." Tyler came to see me that weekend. We met at our usual coffee shop, the same one where we used to plan our holiday trip to Oregon. He wore a soft blue checkered shirt, holding his cup like he didn't know where to begin. "I'm not angry with you," he said after a few minutes of silence. "Really. But I felt like just one more person you had to take care of." I lowered my head. I didn't argue. "You don't need more to carry. You need someone to lean on," he continued. "But you didn't let me be that person." "I'm sorry." "I know." He smiled softly, "and I hope that one day you'll save a place in your heart for yourself, not for your family or for the people you think you owe." Then he rose and rested his hand softly on my shoulder. "When you're ready, I'll still wish you happiness, whether it's with me or not." He walked away, and I sat there, once again with the ache of losing something precious, something I was the one to let slip through my fingers. In the days that followed, I woke up early, made coffee, and went to the office like always. But I no longer entered that house, the one filled with scented candles, monogrammed notebooks, and framed awards on the wall, with pride. I walked in like someone learning how to live again. This time, not for anyone else. After work, I didn't take the usual detour to my parents' house. No more bringing dinner, checking the electric bill, or changing the porch light. I disconnected, not out of resentment, but because for the first time in my life, I wanted to see what would happen if I stopped. The first message from my mother came on the 8th day after that dinner. "The bank sent a letter, maybe it's a mistake, can you check?" I set the phone down without replying. There was no anger, no pain. It felt like looking at a house I used to know, now hollow, silent, and meaningless. 3 days later, she messaged again. "Skylar, if you don't help, the house will be foreclosed, I mean it." I stayed silent. On the 15th day, I got a message from Blake. "So you've disappeared for good. The least you could do is care about Mom and Dad. They gave you everything." Everything? I thought of those late nights studying under a dim desk lamp while Mom napped. The paychecks I handed over and called a little contribution. The college years when I couldn't afford new shoes because I sent money home to cover the bills. That house? I paid every single month. Yet in my brother's eyes, I was still the one who needed to repay them. I didn't text back. Instead, I sent a PDF with 3 attachments. Legal proof the house had been in my name for the past 3 years. A full record of every mortgage payment made from my account to the bank. The original loan contract, with a note from my attorney verifying the legal transfer of ownership based on my financial agreement. I didn't say another word. 30 minutes later, I received a message from my mother. "What is this? Are you trying to destroy this family?" Another 30 minutes passed. My phone rang. Then another message arrived. "If you dare take this house from your parents, you are no longer part of this family." I silenced the phone, plugged it into charge, screen face down. That afternoon, I got an email from Laura, my attorney. "Skylar, I received a call from the legal counsel representing Mrs. Janice Morgan. They're requesting verification of the ownership transfer. I've sent over the documents. Everything is valid and confirmed. We'll issue a formal response if they pursue legal action." I pressed my lips together. A short laugh escaped, not out of humor, but the bitter irony of my family. They lived in that house for 5 years without paying a dime, and now, when I pulled my hand away, I was the one threatening their stability. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Miss Morgan? This is Andrew Stern, attorney for Mrs. Janice Morgan. We would like to schedule a meeting to discuss the current ownership situation." I set the phone down. Outside, the afternoon rain pounded the pavement like someone was breathing heavily against the glass. I thought back over the years. All the quiet payments, the dinners I brought like clockwork, the emails I wrote to the bank asking for extensions because my parents were going through temporary hardship. I never imagined the day would come when I'd need a lawyer to protect myself from my own blood. But then, a strange calm settled over me. I reopened Laura's email and typed a short reply. I agree to the meeting, on the condition that both sides have legal representation present. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped, but I knew the biggest storm of my life had never come from the weather. The conference room at Laura Mendez's law office was on the 6th floor of a glass building in downtown Boulder. That morning, I arrived 20 minutes early. Laura had already prepared everything: paperwork, payment history, the ownership transfer agreement, bank statements, and one document I never thought I'd need to bring: an unusual supplemental borrower entry that recently showed up in a credit report. At exactly 9:12 a.m., my mother walked in. She wore a plum-colored sweater, her hair neatly curled, lips painted bright red like she was attending a family argument, not a legal proceeding. My father followed behind, hands in his coat pockets, eyes fixed on the floor. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan," Laura greeted them calmly and gestured for them to sit. I was already there, seated at the head of the table. My eyes met my mother's for a moment, but I didn't nod. She sat down, crossed her legs, arms folded. "I want to know why my daughter took our house out from under us." Laura opened the folder calmly. "We'll explain everything. But first, please allow me to clarify that all transfers were legal, authorized by signed documents, notarized in Boulder County, and approved per Colorado state regulations. Full records are right here." She slid the file across the table. My father glanced at it, flipping a few pages, but my mother didn't touch it. "This is betrayal," she said, her voice rising. "No one secretly changes a title and stays quiet for 5 years. I paid the mortgage. Every month, I didn't take anything. I kept it for the family. Really, for the 2 of you. And I never hid it to steal. I stayed quiet because I didn't want you to feel like a burden." "Oh, how noble of you." I stayed silent, not out of shame. I hoped you'd see what I did came from love, not control. Laura stepped in to keep the meeting on track. "Here's the current situation. The house is now legally under the name Skylar Morgan. If you wish to remain and regain ownership, there are 2 options. Either repurchase the property through a legal buyback agreement, or negotiate a sale, and divide any remaining proceeds. We don't have money to buy it back, my mother snapped. Laura's tone remained even. Then selling the property may be the more appropriate solution. However, there is a new matter that must be addressed in today's meeting. I sat up straighter. This was the part even I wasn't sure I was ready to face out loud. Laura opened a separate file, pulled out 3 sheets, and slid them across the table. These are copies of a loan agreement from a cryptocurrency investment platform, Genesis Capital. The listed borrower, Janice Morgan. However, the signature does not match your registered legal signature, and the email on the account is linked to Blake Morgan. My mother frowned. What? It means, I said, Blake used your name to borrow over $30,000, invested it in cryptocurrency, and defaulted. And when the lender couldn't collect, they investigated and discovered the house you live in is one of the valuable assets they could pursue. My father's head snapped up. That can't be. We cross-checked the signatures, IP addresses, and transaction history. There is clear evidence that Blake's bank account was linked to the platform, and Genesis Capital is preparing legal action if repayment isn't arranged. My mother went pale. No way. Blake would never do that. I already tried to send you all the documents, I said. But instead of reading them, you called me a traitor. Mom, she whispered, turning to my father as if searching for support. He flipped through the second and third sheets. His hands were visibly shaking. Oh my God, he murmured. It's Blake's handwriting. He used his old school email. The password is his birthday. Finally, my mother looked up at me, her eyes bitter. So you're just going to let this family fall apart? I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm simply done taping over a crack that shattered years ago. Laura gently closed the folder, as if marking the end, or the beginning, of a chapter. None of us knew what would come next, but in that moment, every secret, every silence, every misplaced responsibility had finally been called by its rightful name. We'd returned to the old house on a Saturday afternoon, after Laura had finalized everything with the bank and Genesis Capital's attorney agreed to withdraw the lawsuit, on the condition that my family sell the house to repay the debt Blake left behind. No more warnings, no more letters from the bank, only decisions waiting to be made. And I wanted those choices to come from my parents, not a judge. The house was strangely quiet when I stepped inside. The familiar scent of lavender air freshener, the faded brown couch, and the painting of a woodland deer above the fireplace, all still there. But the air had changed. Mom was sitting at the dining table, holding a cup of tea. Dad stood by the window, looking out at the backyard, where Blake and I used to push each other on the swing, the summer I was 8. I walked in without knocking, without hesitation like all the times before. I wasn't there to ask. I was there to close the chapter. Dad turned around slowly. Thank you for coming, he said. Your mom, she wanted to see you too. The situation is clear now, I began. I don't want to drag this family into further legal chaos. I won't press criminal charges against Blake. But I can't keep doing things the way they used to be. Mom set her cup down. The soft clink of ceramic on wood sounded like a period. What do you mean? She asked. I mean, the house needs to be sold. I won't ask for reimbursement for the past 5 years. I'm not demanding any other compensation. But the proceeds from the sale need to be used to pay off the debt Blake took out using your name. The rest, you can keep. Mom was silent. Dad slowly sat in the chair across from me. I understand, he said, his voice raspy, and I'm sorry. I looked at him and saw how much older he looked. In the span of a few weeks, I let you carry too much for too long, he continued. I know that. I see it clearer than ever now. You held this family together while we pretended we didn't need help. I swallowed hard. Not from anger, but from pain. Because I had waited so many years for that acknowledgement, and when it finally came, I didn't need it the way I used to. I don't blame you, I replied. But I can't keep being responsible for what others choose to ignore. Mom rotated the teacup between her hands. Her eyes didn't meet mine, just stared at the table, as if it held some answer she hadn't yet found. "You're better than me," she said suddenly, softly, barely more than a breath. She still didn't look at me, but her lips were pressed tight, her eyes glassy. "I don't know how to admit that. I don't know when your capability, your success, started making me feel threatened. I used to wish you'd say, 'I'm proud of you,'" I admitted, "for so many years." "And I didn't," she replied, "because I was afraid that if I did, I'd disappear. I'd no longer matter in your life." "You still matter," I said, gently, for the first time. "Just not in the way you were used to." The three of us sat in silence for a long while. No blame, no more words. After a long pause, I rose to my feet. "I've left a list of reputable real estate agents. If you need help finding a more suitable place, I'm happy to connect you with someone." I walked to the door. Before unlocking it, I turned around, looked at the house one last time. Not with regret, but to confirm that I had done everything I could for it. And now, I owed it nothing. "Skylar," I paused. "No matter what happens, you are still the kindest thing we've ever had." This time, I walked away on my own feet. No head bowed, no weight on my shoulders, and no one's permission needed. I moved into the lakeside apartment on an early April morning when the willow trees by the shore were still veiled in a light mist. The place was just over 800 square feet, but filled with sunlight and a soft quiet. No one calling from downstairs, no game noises from the next room, no sidelong glances or heavy sighs. Just me, the sound of rippling water, and the smell of morning coffee. I set my desk by the large window facing the lake and began building my financial consulting practice for independent women. Those who, like me, once believed they had to carry it all just because they were the eldest, the responsible one, or worse, the educated one. I named it Clarity House. There, I didn't teach women how to invest or plan for retirement. I taught them to ask, who is your money really serving? And are you paying for it with your emotional well-being? My first client was a nurse, newly divorced, who had sold her wedding ring to pay college tuition for her ex-husband's child. The second was a 60-year-old widow whose kids had manipulated her retirement account to invest in crypto they didn't understand. My work wasn't only financial. It meant being present, hearing the quiet exhaustion no one else had asked about. One evening, I posted a long article on Medium. Title: "I used to be my family's financial plan." In it, I wrote about quietly paying the mortgage, about the silence that had been labeled family, about the slap at the dinner table and the moment I canceled the payments, as if flipping the final switch on a collapsing system. The post went viral. Hundreds of women commented, shared their own stories. About being financially exploited, about being cast as the strong one. No one ever checked on. A small publisher emailed, asking if I'd consider turning it into a book. I wasn't ready. But for the first time, I felt like my voice no longer lived trapped within the walls of an old house. Like, my brother was sued by Genesis Capital a month later. I didn't intervene. Mom called and left a 3-minute voicemail. No blame, no demands, just a choked-up voice saying, "Do you think if I'd known earlier, things might have been different?" I didn't respond to the voicemail, but a week later she sent an email. "It's sunny today. I brought the old plant pot out to the back porch. Didn't expect the flowers to bloom again. The neighbor, Mila, gave me some organic soil. I think I should start over somewhere. Lavender seems like a gentle beginning." She didn't apologize, didn't revisit the past, only offered a quiet piece of herself. For the first time, she wrote to me as a person. Not a manager, not someone expecting obedience. And I didn't feel the need to reply right away. I met Grant on a Tuesday, during a financial consultation. He was a freelance painter in his early 40s, living off gallery sales and teaching part-time at a local community art center. Grant came to ask about stabilizing his budget after his former partner abruptly backed out of their shared lease. He spoke slowly, tilted his head when listening, and smiled with his whole face. At first, I kept it professional. But after the third session, when he looked at me and asked, "How long have you been forgetting yourself?" I had no answer. The next week, I invited him for coffee. Not a consultation, just a normal morning where neither of us had to be the strong one. Grant didn't pry. He told me about the old cat in his studio, about his 6 a.m. sketching habit, and how he grows mint for tea, something I always bought in tea bags because I never had time to make myself. I don't know where this is going, but for the first time in years, I let someone in without fearing they'd break me, or demand I stand tall even when I'm falling apart. I needed them to sit beside me, right where I was. And Grant, somehow, knew how to do that. He simply showed up. That afternoon, sunlight shimmered on the lake like the sky was writing a quiet letter with light. I sat on a small wooden chair on the balcony, holding a mug of mint tea made from the plant Grant brought me 2 weeks earlier, a gift without occasion. On my lap was an old brown leather notebook. The first page was already open. Fountain pen moved across the paper, blue ink appearing with every steady beat of my heart. I wrote a letter to myself. The 20-year-old girl who once walked out of her college dorm with honors, a torn suitcase, and a heart full of illusions about family. Skylar, you'll think that if you try long enough, endure well enough, and keep everything from falling apart, then you'll be loved. But no. Sacrifice is not the price of love. It must be a choice, and it must have limits. You'll learn this, but not easily. You'll be called selfish for setting boundaries, a traitor for stepping away. And you'll feel alone, but eventually you'll understand. Home can't be held together by silence, and a woman should never be the foundation for an entire family if it means losing herself. I closed the notebook. Below, the lake rippled softly as a breeze passed through. The phone rang, breaking the stillness. I reached for it and saw the screen. Dad. I hesitated, then picked up. "Hi, Dad." "Hey, sweetheart, can I bother you for a minute?" His voice held a hint of hesitation, a kind I never thought he had. I could hear the wind through the receiver, imagining him standing on the porch, notebook in hand, eyes on the maple tree Mom once planted in the backyard. "I've got a question about my IRA," he said. "I read the documents, but the parts about annual withdrawal allocation are a bit confusing. Do you have a minute?" "I do. Go ahead and ask." No complaints. No lines like, "Wish you came back sooner," or "This is too complicated, can you do it for me?" Just a father relearning how to stand on his own. And choosing to ask his daughter as an adult, not as a shadow to hide behind. We didn't say anything else, but I knew something had shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, but enough for the person on the other end of the line to feel it. I hung up, set the phone down, and stood. The breeze was just cool enough to make me pull my coat a little tighter. I once believed I had to hold everything up, to be the steady one, the constant, but that belief doesn't live here anymore. I turned back inside, to my small, warm space, the bookshelf, the cactus, the sweater Grant left on the hook last time he visited. And I knew I had entered a new chapter, one where every relationship had clear boundaries, and every love was allowed to exist without costing me myself. Have you ever been in my position? Not the rebel, not the ungrateful one, but the only person brave enough to ask, who is really carrying the weight in this family? Have you ever been so tired that you couldn't love anyone because all your energy went to holding everyone else up? If so, I hope you know this. You are not alone, and you are not wrong for saying enough. Share your thoughts in the comments about family, boundaries, or simply one thing you've always wished someone would say to you. Don't forget to follow the channel to hear more true, deep, and profoundly human stories about family, hurt, and healing.